Hi, you guys. Our last chapter, we learned all about Miss Honey, and we learned that Miss Trunchbull is actually her aunt. So crazy stuff going on. And this chapter is called The Names, and actually, we only have a few chapters left. I think only 3 chapters left. We got through this book so quickly, I'm shocked. Anyway, here we are. The names. Miss Trunchbull, cried Matilda, jumping out a foot in the air. You mean she's your aunt? She brought you up? Yes, Miss Honey said. No wonder you were terrified, Matilda cried. The other day we saw her grab a girl by the pigtails and throw her over the playground fence. You haven't seen anything, Miss Honey said. After my father died, I was about 5 and a half, and she used to make me bathe by myself all alone. And if she came up and thought that I hadn't washed properly, she would push my head under the water and hold it there. But don't get me started on what she used to do. That won't help us at all. No, said Matilda, it won't. We came here, Miss Honey said, to talk about you, and I've been talking about nothing but myself the entire time. I feel like a fool. I am much more interested in just how much you can do with those amazing eyes of yours. I can move things, Matilda said. I know you can. I can push things over. How would you like it, Miss Honey said, if we made some very cautious experiments to see just how much you can move and push things? Quite surprisingly, Matilda said, if you don't mind, Miss Honey, I think I'd rather not. I want to go home now and think about all the things I've heard this afternoon. Miss Honey stood up at once. Of course, she said. I have kept you far too long. Your mother will start to worry. She never does that, Matilda said, smiling. But I think I would like to go home now, if you don't mind. Come along then, Miss Honey said. I'm sorry I gave you such rotten tea. Oh, you didn't at all, Matilda said. I loved it. The two of them walked all the way to Matilda's house in complete silence. Miss Honey sensed that Matilda wanted it that way. The child seemed so lost in thought that she hardly looked where she was walking. And when they reached the gates of Matilda's home, Miss Honey said, You had better forget everything I told you this afternoon. I promise I won't do that, Matilda said, but I promise not to talk to anyone about it ever, not even you. I think that would be wise, Miss Honey said. I won't promise to stop talking about it, though, Miss Honey said. Miss Honey, Matilda said, I've been thinking about it all the way back from your cottage, and I believe that I got a little bit of an idea. Oh, you mustn't, Miss Honey said. Please forget it. I would like to ask you 3 last things before I stop talking about it, Matilda said. Please, will you answer them, Miss Honey? Miss Honey smiled. It was extraordinary, she told herself, how this little snippet of a girl seemed suddenly to be taking charge of her problems, and with such authority, too. Well, she said, that depends on what the questions are. The first thing is, Matilda said, what did Miss Trunchbull call your father when she was around at home? I'm sure she called him Magnus, Miss Honey said. That was his first name. And what did your father call Miss Trunchbull? Well, he called her name, Agatha. Miss Honey said, that's what he would have called her. And lastly, Matilda said, what did your father and Miss Trunchbull call you around the house? They call me Jenny, Miss Honey said. Matilda pondered these answers very carefully. Let me make sure that I've gotten them right, she says. In the house at your home, your father was Magnus, Miss Trunchbull was Agatha, and you were Jenny. Am I right? That's correct, Miss Honey said. Thank you, Matilda said. And now I won't mention the subject any more. Miss Honey wondered what on earth was going on in the mind of that child. Don't do anything silly, she warned. Matilda laughed and turned away and ran up the path to her front door, calling out as she went, Goodbye, Miss Honey. Thank you so very much for the tea. I had a wonderful time. The next chapter is Oh my gosh, these chapters are really short, so I'm going to read 2 of them and I'm going to stop. The practice. Matilda found the empty house as usual. Her father was not yet back from work, and her mother was not yet back from bingo, and her brother might be anywhere. She went straight into the living room and opened the drawer of the sideboard, where she knew her father kept a box of cigars. She took one out and carried it up to the bedroom and shut the door. Now for the practice, she told herself. I'm going to be tough. I'm determined to do it. Her plan for helping Miss Honey was beginning to form beautifully in her mind. She had it now in almost every detail. But in the end of it, it all depended upon her being able to do it one very special thing with her eye power. She knew she wouldn't manage it right away. But she felt fairly confident that with such a great deal of practice and effort, she would succeed in the end. The cigar was essential. It was perhaps a bit thicker than she would have liked, but the weight of it was about right. It would be fine to practice with. There was a small dressing table in Matilda's bedroom with her hairbrush and comb in it, and with 2 library books. She cleared these things to one side and laid the cigar right down in the middle of the dressing table. Then she walked away and sat at the end of her table. She was now about 10 feet away from the cigar. She settled herself and began to concentrate, and very quickly, this time, she felt the electricity beginning to flow inside of her head, gathering itself behind the eyes, and the eyes became hot, and millions of tiny invisible hands began pushing out like sparks towards the cigar. Move, she whispered, and into her intense surprise, almost at once, the cigar, with its little red and gold paper band around it, rolled all the way across the table and fell onto the carpet. Matilda enjoyed that. It was lovely doing it. It had felt as though sparks were going around and around in her head, flashing out of her eyes. He had given her a sense of power that was almost divine, meaning like a god, kind of. And how quick it had been this time, how simple. She crossed the bedroom and picked up the cigar and put it back on the table. Now for the difficult one, she thought. But if I have to push, then surely I have the power to lift. It is vital that I learn how to lift, she thought. I must learn how to lift it right up into the air and keep it there. It's not a very heavy thing, just like a cigar. She sat on the end of her bed and started again. It was easy to summon up the power behind her eyes now. It was like pushing a trigger in her brain. Lift, she whispered. Lift, lift. At first, the cigar started to roll away, but then, with Matilda's concentration fierce, one end of it slowly lifted up about an inch off the table. With a colossal effort, she managed to hold it there for about 10 seconds. Then it fell back again. Whew, she said. I am getting it. I am starting to do it. For the next hour, Matilda kept practicing. And in the end, she had managed, by the sheer power of her eyes, to lift a whole cigar clear off the table, about 6 inches into the air, and hold it there for about a minute. Then suddenly she was so exhausted she fell back to the bed and went to sleep. That was how her mother found her later in that evening. What's the matter with you? Her mother said, waking her up. Are you ill? Oh gosh, Matilda said, getting up and looking around. No, I'm all right. I was just a bit tired, that's all. From then on, every day after school, Matilda shut herself in a room and practiced with the cigar. And soon it was all coming together in the most wonderful way. 6 days later, by the following Wednesday evening, she was able not only to lift the cigar into the air, but also to move it around exactly as she wished. It was beautiful. I can do it, she cried. I can really do it. I can pick up the cigar just with my eye power and push it and pull it into the air any way I want. All she had to do now was to put her great plan into action. And that's where I'm going to stop because We only have a few chapters left, and I don't want to finish it right away. So I'm probably going to read 2 chapters next time, too. But what do you think she's going to do? And think about it. I would say this dry erase marker is probably the same size as a cigar. And if you don't know what a cigar is, it's like a cigarette. So you probably shouldn't know what that is. That's good. But it's probably around this size. So I want you to predict, and if you already know, just don't say anything. But I want you to predict what she's practicing. Like, what does she want to use that's the same size as pretty much this? All right, goodbye.